Hi, this is Taxichronicles and I'm your host, Simon Rushton. Today we have yet another customer in the car. He's in the security industry, but as usual, I'm going to let him explain about what he does. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Simon. Very amazing experience. But so my name's Oliver and I'm an investigations and security risk management, I suppose you could call me expert. I come from a law enforcement background of 12 years. I lived in Australia for 17 of those and spent a period of time working for the Australian government overseas in a country called Nauru as their ethical standards investigator for their Operation Sovereign Borders, which was the offshore processing centres that the Australian government has to minimise deaths at sea and people entering the country illegally. I now work here in London as the head of an investigations and security risk management company which is based in Hong Kong. We focus on looking after high net worth, ultra high net worth and corporate clients in providing them with investigational and security expertise to complement what they're doing, to support them, to identify risks and to respond to times of crisis. So I suppose no 2 days for me are the same. I can be advising a client on reputational issues, or they have a significant investigation which needs to be undertaken overseas and some due diligence done on an individual that they're getting too close to, or they want to get close to but want to ensure that they are the person who they say they are. So it varies really on a day-to-day basis.
What would you say, is there a common trend or common issue that most clients come to you with that they could be sorting out themselves? We're not sorting out themselves, but it's just like inside. It's like a common trend, a common problem.
Well, we operate at a level where a lot of people really don't have the expertise to do what we do. For instance, I do phone forensics, so I analyse mobile phones, I recover deleted data, I image phones for law clients and private clients. So that's an expertise which you couldn't do yourself. The equipment in itself is £35,000, so these are all significant investments for one-off opportunities. So a lot of clients in the early, if your basic private investigators, which is what sometimes people can describe me as, are often approached to deal with like infidelity and cheating husbands and wives and missing persons and that sort of stuff. Isn't the area that I'm in, but certainly that's probably the most common type of inquiry.
Okay. So missing wives and things like that. What would you say is the hardest? What's the hardest case that you've worked on?
Last year I had a gentleman who was arrested in Singapore. He had 90 grams of cocaine in his suitcase and was facing the death penalty. His 2 children contacted 3 other investigation agencies to help them prove his innocence. But sadly they were all too concerned that the risk was far too high, because ultimately if you have a client die, it can have bad ramifications on your reputation. Maybe you didn't do a good enough job, maybe it wasn't your fault, but you're still associated with it. So nobody would take on this job. Anyway, I chose to take it on. And after 6 months of investigations, I identified that his wife was responsible for placing the drugs in his bag, because ultimately she didn't want to enter into a divorce, because she wanted to, she didn't want to split the $15 million that she had as an asset pool. So she thought the next best thing to do was to have him incarcerated permanently in a foreign country. Quite a harrowing investigation for me to undertake, and I did it with a couple of colleagues who I brought on board to support me. So last year I got awarded the UK's Investigator of the Year award for saving his life and getting him back home. It's probably the biggest investigation to date.
So guys, if you ever have any problems, you know that he's a man to call. I'll tell you one thing, that you're a brave man taking that on. I think I have to ask about some details there. Did you have to go in her phone and check the history?
Yeah, so it's a complex one in the sense that there's a type of case which we would call circumstantial evidence, and circumstantial evidence is where you have a series of circumstances which support really an outcome, and ultimately the circumstantial evidence for that case was so strong in terms of the behaviours of some members of his family that it was overwhelmingly obvious that they were responsible for his demise. But what it did require is ultimately, when you're looking at drugs being placed in suitcases, is following the suitcase. Where did it go? Who had it? Who was in it? And there were a lot of telltale signs that these individuals were responsible. There was a family communal computer in the house that one of the girls was able to get to us, a laptop which we forensically analysed and identified that a purchase had been made on the dark web of £30,000 worth of cocaine, which was delivered by post, which was then the drugs that were placed in his suitcase very badly. We were then able to also match up a piece of tape which was in his suitcase to some tape which was inside the house. The rip was identical to the piece of tape which was made, because she didn't make a perfect cut. So, you piece all that together and you present a very strong argument to the Singaporean authorities that they've got the wrong guy, and then ultimately the intelligence that they were provided with to stop him at customs was consistent of of one of the family members who'd made a phone call at that exact time to an international phone number which was diverted. So quite a few pieces in the puzzle to put together, and and sometimes in investigations there's a lot of luck, and we had a bit of that, and ultimately we were able to get him home.
So you sound like a real life Sherlock Holmes.
Well, nice.
I'm gonna keep your number in case I get married.
Yeah, that's right. Bit of due diligence.
Okay, that's deep. That's deep. How did it turn out? Obviously, they acquitted him.
Yeah, they in some of these cases, these criminal cases, charges are what they call discontinued. So these charges were discontinued, and he was handed over into our care, and we obviously gave him a very thorough debrief. Where we go over, what happened, what was, how did he end up in the position he did, etc., etc. So it was, quite overwhelming for him, to say the least, because ultimately it led to a significant breakdown in his marriage, and some serious questions being asked by the children as to kind of where they sat in terms of their relationship with their mother, which kind of also broke down. So very interesting stuff.
Yeah. So the moral to that story is, if you're going to get a divorce, don't live with the person, move out straight away.
Yeah, potentially, exactly right. So, but that's one of many cases in terms of big jobs. I did a job 2 years ago where a guy had made a video with a woman that wasn't his wife, and it was taken by an individual that was working close to this particular family, and he was blackmailed for $500,000 that if he didn't pay up, this video would make it onto the internet and absolutely damage his reputation, because he's a very, very good businessman. So, and those are crises where clients don't know who or where to go to for help. And so our client base is people like that who don't always need us, but they know if there's a problem they can call up and we'll be there.
You should have offered your services to Kevin Hart. I don't know if you heard about that case. He had exactly the same case, and it was one of his inner circle who had filmed him when he was in Las Vegas and asked for $1 million. And it couldn't be proven in court, so the case was dropped, but he just obviously banished him from his friendship circle who he looked after. But you could have earned yourself a packet there.
Yeah, it could have been a good paycheck day, that one. So clients come from all different backgrounds. Some are well known, some aren't. Some are just normal people that find themselves in a pickle. So it's there's no consistency really.
And what kind of issues do these? I know you've mentioned touched on it before. The corporate companies, what's their kind of issues? Because everything you've been speaking about is more domestic.
Correct. Yeah. So corporates do an awful lot of due diligence, and the corporate world still has issues in terms of risks. Our company is Hong Kong based. We look at issues all throughout Asia for clients. So as a company, we'll do due diligence in places like Hong Kong, Shanghai, or China, I should say, Malaysia, Thailand. During this COVID-19 crisis, we've been doing an awful lot of PPE due diligence. So, there's an awful lot of pop-up PPE suppliers, people claiming to be able to provide, very good, high-quality PPE, but it turns out a lot of it can be fake. Clients spend millions on that stuff at the moment. So that's what we've been doing, is vetting an awful lot of manufacturers. So there's a totally separate arm to what we do, is focusing on that particular support.
Would you say is it a hard business to get into, this industry that you're doing?
I kind of fell into it, I, in terms of right place, right time sort of stuff. I'd suggest that's probably a big part of it. But I come from a very strong investigations background from policing. I then moved into the intelligence space. So your skill set's continually growing. And then really where the money is, where people want to be earning good money, is in the private sector. So that's obviously where I've ended up. So it was never my intention to come into this world. I just kind of gravitated towards it, and here I am.
On the domestic side of things, where people want to find out about if their partner's cheating, what do you ask? You just kind of get compromising photos of them or something?
Yeah, they're always difficult jobs, those ones, very emotively led. They're very, very high maintenance jobs because there's a lot at stake for everybody. Often one will say, surveillance is a breach of someone's privacy, but ultimately a loved one has the right to know whether or not their spouse is being faithful or cheating on them, so they can move on and do something different with their lives. So it's about getting a fine balancing act of identifying what the person's doing, when they're doing it, obtaining the evidence which is needed to prove that behaviour, and then providing it to the client. But they're difficult jobs to manage, those ones. They're not my favourite, but they do come in from time to time.
On the note of privacy and surveillance and everything like that, does anybody try to take legal action against your company to say, well, you shouldn't have been filming me?
Well, there are certainly times when people aren't happy with the fact that they have been under investigation or they've been surveilled or whatever. Here in the UK, you have the ICO, which oversees the laws of the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations, and we do a data protection impact assessment, a DPIA, and that impact assessment determines whether or not there are grounds for us to carry out the investigation. There are going to be times when investigators don't do those, and they do it just because of the money that's involved, but ultimately that impact assessment gives you the grounds as to why you decided to do what you do. So, and if anybody ever does come knocking, you can explain why you did it, for how long you did it, and ultimately what you've done with their personal information. Because there's laws around how long are you maintaining that data, where's it being stored, can it be accessed remotely by anybody. You hear of all these data breaches, hackers getting into airlines and getting all their customers' details. That's all significantly huge stuff. So it's managed very, very, very carefully, and ultimately we try not to hold on to people's data for too long and destroy it as soon as the case is finalised. But there is, going back to your original question, from time to time you do get people that aren't happy and wish to complain, but ultimately everything is lawful. It is lawful to do what we do. It's just people are being caught out, and you're potentially the weak link in the chain, and ultimately to take out that anger and anxiety.
So I'm just trying to get a clear understanding. I understand that with kind of legal cases, you need to keep evidence for a period of time. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
At the same time, the government's saying you can't keep people's data for a period of time.
Yeah.
So where's the kind of cut-off from?
Well, it varies from case to case. If you're dealing with like a homicide matter and you're dealing with exhibits, there's obviously opportunities for people to appeal those sort of cases over a long period of time. So you generally find those sort of exhibits get for 7 years. Mm-hmm. Some of them even for life. There'll be exhibit halls all over this country full of exhibits of matters which date back years and years and years, purely because they can't be destroyed because of the nature of the matter. Some matters of a more simple nature, maybe a drug possession or a weapons offence. Once those matters are finalised and the appeal times have run out, those exhibits get authorised, for deletion or destruction. And in terms of what we do in the private sector, as soon as a matter is finalised, if there's no necessity for court and the like, then there's no need to retain that data, and you just destroy it, because there's no need to retain it any longer.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned homicide. Do you help in homicide cases quite often?
Yeah, I've done two outside of the police, criminal defence matters where the offender has wanted support in trying to obtain evidence to seek an acquittal or to get a retrial at the least. They're difficult matters in terms, the one I did was a drug deal gone bad where 3 people were shot and killed and then buried, and my client wasn't denying the offence but was denying the manner in which the police interviewed him, and was looking at a technicality in terms of getting a retrial and then a reduction in potential sentencing. So, you know, often, you know, having come from a policing background, I look at technicalities and wonder, you know, it does question your ethical compass as to whether or not you're willing to support somebody.
So it must have been hard for you as a policeman. You're looking at this person and you're thinking, well, you are
guilty, you know. It's a horrific crime to end the lives of 3 people, albeit a drug deal. And to be honest with you, this doesn't minimise what was occurring, but all 4 people, including the offender, were bad individuals. But, you know, so the element of emotion is taken out of it. But they still have children, they still have families, they still have wives, brothers, all the like. So, you know, but from a policing perspective, having spent 12 years in the police and then having to investigate something where you know the individual is guilty and they're purely wanting to get off on a technicality, does kind of pull at those strings as to, you know, really, is there an opportunity here to help this person, or should they be seeking other help? You know, I won't touch any child-related matters. I won't support anybody in that area. If you know it. At the end of the day, the police don't arrest anybody. There's ultimately always some level of suspicion, rightly or wrongly, you know, and hopefully the court process will determine rightly or wrongly whether someone's guilty. So yeah, but yeah, you know, there's a varied amount of criminal defence work out there in terms of investigating it.
That's interesting. I like the fact that you won't touch the child-related issues.
No.
You know, that sits very well with me, to be honest.
I think if I didn't have children, my mindset may be slightly different. But because I can now personalise issues with my own children and how vulnerable children are in society, I think anybody that's been arrested for those types of offences, well, certainly it's, you know, there will be some that will, but it's my position, my moral grounding, that I won't look to support those clients.
But I suppose on the flip side, there are probably cases where somebody is innocent, and it's a hard one.
It is a hard one. Really, and the problem is that no longer, you know, the jury system is where, you know, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. But sadly, the media will paint a completely different... You look at some of these hashtag Metoo movement cases where people are accused of historical offences against people. You know, the media almost determines your guilt rather than the court process, which is ever frustrating because historical allegations are very hard to disprove. You know, you've got often I said versus he said, so you've got one person saying something against another, there are no witnesses. So ultimately, you know, and everyone, rightly or wrongly, jumps on the side of the victim when really they should take a very open mind as to, you know, looking at the evidence to try. You know, there are some people that historically have gone through an absolute torrid time, you know, and are the victims of awful abuse from many years ago. But there are also some, and it's been shown, that have been accused of some very serious crimes that have never been substantiated. They've never been arrested. You know, the likes of Cliff Richard, you know, and the like. There's a guy that his career was ruined. You know, you had that guy that lied most recently, you know, where the Met had to do a huge review and all those people were arrested, you know, high-profile figures. So it can be incredibly damaging.
Well, on that note, I have to say it's been a great interview with you. And if anybody wants to find you to use your services, how can they look you up?
Yeah, sure. So I work for a company called Ion Asia, and it's www.ionasia.com.hk. And we have a London office here listed on the website.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for that. And for the listeners out there, I hope you like that. Feel free to like and subscribe and share. Don't forget our other podcast, Africa Investing Stories. The season 2 is out now. It's the first episode, which was recorded yesterday, is about investing in oneself and one's family prior to making a big investment financially. Anyway, I hope you had a good time and a good listen. Thanks and bye.